Some memories don't knock before they return. They wait in the dark until the exact moment you're weakest. I learned that on a cold Thursday night in October. The Callahan estate sat on a cliff overlooking the Atlantic, 15 miles outside a small coastal town where most people locked their doors before sunset and minded their own business after dark. The mansion was enormous. Stone walls, long hallways, rooms nobody used anymore. People imagined a place like that would feel powerful. It didn't. It felt empty. My name is Everett Callahan, and for 27 years, silence had been the only thing I trusted. My father built an empire. I inherited it. Newspapers called me successful. Rivals called me dangerous. But none of them knew the truth. Every night, no matter how expensive the suit or how crowded the room, I still heard echoes of the last conversation I ever had with my mother. She died when I was 11 years old, and something inside me died with her. By 11:30 that night, most of the staff had gone home. Rain tapped softly against the tall windows as I walked through the West Wing carrying a glass of sparkling water and a stack of financial reports I had no interest in reading. The grandfather clock in the main corridor ticked steadily. The house breathed its usual loneliness. Then I heard it. A voice. Soft. Distant. Almost too quiet to notice. I stopped walking. First I thought it was the radio. But there were no radios in that part of the house. The voice drifted through the hallway again. A woman singing. Not performing. Not trying to impress anyone. Just singing to herself. My chest tightened. The glass slipped from my fingers and shattered against the marble floor. The sound echoed through the corridor. The singing stopped immediately. For a second, neither of us moved. Then I followed the sound toward the old library in the basement level. The room smelled like paper and cedar wood. Shelves stretched from floor to ceiling. Near a rolling ladder stood a young woman holding a stack of books against her chest.
Rodan Hale.
27 years old. One of the newer employees. Quiet. Responsible. Easy to overlook. Her eyes widened when she saw me standing there. Mr. Callahan, I'm sorry. I didn't realize anyone was awake. But I barely heard her. My pulse hammered in my ears. Because I knew that melody. Every note. Every pause. Every word. My mother used to sing it while brushing my hair back from my forehead when storms rolled in from the ocean. She sang it the night before she died.
No recordings existed.
No sheet music. No family members remembered it. After years of searching, I had convinced myself the song disappeared with her. Yet somehow this stranger knew it. Rowan shifted awkwardly beneath my stare. Are you okay? She asked. I swallowed hard. My voice sounded unfamiliar when I finally spoke. Where did you learn that song? She blinked. My grandmother used to sing it to me when I was little. The room suddenly felt colder. Because in that moment, I realized something impossible. Either fate had an incredibly cruel sense of humor, or the past I buried 27 years ago had just walked back into my life. Some questions follow you long after they are asked. That night, after Rowan left the library, her words refused to leave my head. My grandmother used to sing it to me. I stood alone among thousands of books, staring at the empty space where she had been only seconds earlier. Rain tapped against the narrow basement windows. Somewhere above me, the old pipes groaned softly. The mansion felt the same. Yet somehow everything had changed. I returned to my office just after midnight. The room overlooked the ocean. Waves rolled through the darkness beyond the glass, silver beneath the moonlight. I opened the bottom drawer of my desk and removed the only photograph I had of my mother. The edges were worn from years of handling. Her smile was gentle. Her eyes carried the same sadness I remembered from my childhood. Next to the photograph sat a silver pocket watch. It had belonged to her. The watch stopped at exactly 7:14 on the morning she died. Every jeweler I hired failed to repair it. Eventually I stopped trying. Some things were not meant to run again. I turned the watch over in my hand and tried to remember every detail of the song. The melody came back instantly. The same melody. Rowan had been singing while organizing books as if it were nothing special. As if it had not just shattered 27 years of certainty. Sleep never came. By sunrise I had already made 3 phone calls. By 8 o'clock, Grant Mercer arrived at the estate carrying a leather folder beneath his arm. Grant had worked for my family for nearly 15 years. If information existed, he usually found it. He settled into the chair across from my desk. "You sounded concerned," he said. I slid a sheet of paper toward him. During the night I had written every lyric I could remember. His eyes scanned the page. "What is this?" "A song." "And?" I leaned back. "I heard someone singing it last night." Grant looked confused. "Why does that matter?" "Because no one should know it." The words almost escaped my mouth. Instead I simply said, "I need information on one of the staff members." He nodded. "Who?"
روان حاله.
For the first time, something flickered across his expression. Not fear. Not surprise. Something closer to discomfort. The reaction lasted less than a second before disappearing. Most people would not have noticed it. I did. "Is there a problem?" I asked quietly. "No," he replied too quickly. "Of course not." He closed the folder. "I will see what I can find." After he left, I walked through the estate without a destination. Employees moved through their routines. Gardeners trimmed hedges. Housekeepers polished furniture. Deliveries arrived at the service entrance. Ordinary life continued. Then I saw Rowan. She stood outside near the greenhouse carrying a crate of books scheduled for donation to the town library. Wind tugged at loose strands of her brown hair. She laughed at something one of the gardeners said. The sound carried across the courtyard. Simple. Unforced. Real. For a moment I watched from a distance. Not because I wanted to, because I could not stop. She looked nothing like my mother. Different eyes. Different smile. Different voice. Yet somehow she carried a piece of a past that should have been impossible to reach. Then Rowan glanced toward the house and our eyes met. Her smile faded slightly. Confusion replaced it. I realized I had been standing there too long. She gave a polite wave. I nodded once and turned away. But hours later, when I entered the music room that had remained locked for decades, I discovered something that made my pulse stop. Sitting on top of the dusty piano was a folded piece of paper, and written across the front in handwriting I recognized immediately were 5 words. For Everett. When the song returns, the past does not always arrive with answers. Sometimes it arrives with more questions. I stood alone in the music room staring at the folded note resting on the piano. Dust covered almost every surface in the room except that single piece of paper, which meant someone had placed it there recently. My hands felt strangely heavy as I picked it up. The handwriting hit me first. Elegant.
Familiar. Pamphlet familiar.
I had spent years studying old birthday cards, letters, and recipes written by my mother. Every loop, every stroke, every detail. This looked exactly the same. My pulse quickened. Slowly I unfolded the paper. Inside was a single sentence. Some songs survive because they are carrying a promise. I read the words 3 times. Then a 4th. There was no signature. No date. Nothing else. Just that sentence. The ocean wind rattled the windows. Somewhere downstairs a door closed softly. The sound snapped me back to reality. Someone was playing a game. Or someone knew something they should not know. I left the music room immediately and found the security office on the 1st floor. Within minutes, footage from the hallway outside the music room appeared on a monitor. I watched every second from the previous 24 hours. Staff members passed by. Gardeners. Housekeepers. Delivery personnel. Then at 2:17 that afternoon, Rowan appeared carrying a stack of books. She paused outside the door, looked inside, then continued walking without entering. That was all. No note. No suspicious behavior. Nothing. Yet somehow seeing her on the screen only deepened the mystery. By late afternoon, Grant Mercer returned. He entered my office carrying a thick file. His expression was carefully neutral. Too neutral. "You asked for information," he said. He placed the folder on my desk. Rowan.
حاله.
27 years old. Born in a small coastal town 300 miles north. Raised primarily by her grandmother, Edith Hale. Works 2 jobs. No criminal history. No lawsuits. No unusual financial activity. Everything looked ordinary. Painfully ordinary. I turned another page. School records. Employment history. Medical information. Nothing connected her to my family. Nothing explained the song. Nothing explained the note. Then I noticed something strange. A date. Rowan's birthday. I froze. My eyes returned to the silver pocket watch sitting beside my desk. For years I had remembered the time it stopped. 7:14. The same morning my mother died. But suddenly another memory surfaced. A conversation with an old watchmaker nearly 15 years earlier. He had mentioned a manufacturing stamp hidden inside the watch case. I opened the watch carefully and checked the engraving. My breath caught. July 14th. The exact date of Rowan Hale's birth. The room suddenly felt smaller. Grant noticed my expression. "What is it?" he asked. I closed the watch immediately. Nothing. But it was not nothing. Coincidences had limits. One song could be chance. One note could be a prank. One matching date could be random. Together they formed something else. Something I could not ignore. That evening I drove into town for the first time in weeks. The annual Harbor Festival had filled the streets with lights and music. Families walked along the waterfront. Children chased one another between food stands. For a few minutes I almost felt normal. Then I saw Rowan. She stood near a booth selling handmade crafts beside an elderly woman I immediately recognized as Edith Hale. Rowan was smiling. Edith was laughing. And around Edith's neck hung a silver pendant I had not seen in 27 years. The same pendant my mother wore in the last photograph ever taken of her. Some objects carry memories. Others carry secrets. The moment I saw the silver pendant around Edith Hale's neck, every sound from the Harbor Festival seemed to disappear. The laughter, the music, the waves hitting the docks. Everything faded beneath the roar of my own heartbeat. I knew that pendant. Small. Silver compass surrounded by delicate engraving. I had seen it hundreds of times as a child. My mother wore it almost every day. In photographs. At breakfast. During walks along the shoreline. Then after her death, it vanished. My father told me it had been lost. Standing 20 yards away from Edith Hale, I suddenly wondered how many other things I had been told were lost. Rowan noticed me first. Her smile disappeared in surprise. She gave a polite wave. The same wave she had given me in the courtyard earlier. Simple. Friendly. Completely unaware that the ground beneath my life was beginning to crack. Edith followed Rowan's gaze and turned toward me. The instant her eyes met mine, something changed. Her expression froze. Not confusion. Recognition. The color drained from her face. She gripped the edge of the table beside her as if steadying herself. That reaction told me more than any investigation had. She knew exactly who I was. And more importantly, she knew why. Before I could move closer, a group of festival visitors crossed between us. Children carrying balloons. Parents balancing paper trays of food. The interruption lasted only seconds. But when the crowd cleared, Edith was already gathering her belongings. Rowan looked concerned. She said something to her grandmother and helped her toward a nearby parking lot. I followed at a distance. Not because I wanted answers immediately, because after 27 years I was afraid of hearing them. The evening air smelled of salt water and fried dough from the food stands lining the harbor. Edith and Rowan reached an aging blue pickup truck parked beneath a street lamp. Before they climbed inside, Edith turned once more. Our eyes met across the distance. Then she did something unexpected. She touched the silver pendant and gently pressed it against her heart. The gesture lasted only a second, yet it felt deeply personal. Familiar somehow. The truck pulled away moments later. I stood alone beneath the festival lights watching the taillights disappear into the night. When I returned to the estate, another surprise was waiting. Package sat on my desk. No return address. No shipping label. Just my name written neatly across the front. The staff had no idea who delivered it. I opened the box carefully. Inside was an old notebook bound in faded green cloth. The edges were worn. The cover carried water stains and years of use. My hands tightened around it, because I recognized it immediately. My mother owned dozens of notebooks. She wrote constantly. Recipes, thoughts, song lyrics, memories. This notebook looked exactly like the one she used. I opened the first page. Most of it was blank. Then I reached the center. Folded between two pages was a photograph. A young woman stood beside the ocean smiling into the camera. My mother. Next to her stood a teenage girl I had never seen before. On the back, written in my mother's unmistakable handwriting, were 6 words that changed everything. If anything happens, find Edith first. There are moments when your entire understanding of the past shifts in a single heartbeat. I sat alone in my office staring at the photograph. My mother stood beside the ocean smiling at the camera. Beside her was a teenage girl with dark hair and bright eyes.
Edith hale.
Younger by decades but unmistakably Edith. I turned the photograph over again. If anything happens, find Edith first. The words seemed to burn through the paper. 4 years I believed my mother had lived a life separated from everyone except our family. That was the story I had been given. That was the story I accepted. Now a photograph, a song, a pendant, and a notebook were quietly dismantling everything I thought I knew. Dawn arrived before I realized I had spent the entire night awake. The ocean outside my window glowed silver beneath the morning light. I picked up my phone and called Grant Mercer. He answered immediately. Too immediately. As though he had been waiting. I need everything you can find on Edith Hale, I said. Silence followed. Just for a second. Then his professional tone returned. Of course.
No summaries.
No reports. Everything. Understood. After the call ended, I opened the notebook again. Most pages were blank. Several contained fragments of song lyrics written in my mother's handwriting. A few pages held sketches of the coastline near the town. Then I reached the final section. Tucked between 2 pages was a pressed wildflower. Beneath it, written in faded ink, were 3 words. Keep your promise. My chest tightened. Promise. The same word from the note left in the music room. Some songs survive because they are carrying a promise. The same message. The same theme. Someone wanted me to connect them. Someone had been guiding me toward Edith from the very beginning. Around noon I drove into town. Not to investigate. At least that is what I told myself. The truth was simpler. I wanted to see Rowan again. That realization irritated me more than it should have. She was connected to a mystery. That should have been the only reason I thought about her. Yet somehow I kept remembering her smile at the harbor festival. The way she laughed with her grandmother. The way she treated everyone around her as though they mattered. It was a kind of warmth I rarely encountered anymore. I found her at the community library unloading donated books from her pickup truck. The building sat near the center of town beside a small coffee shop and a florist. Nothing about it was remarkable. Yet watching Rowan carry heavy boxes through the front door felt strangely grounding. For the first time in weeks my mind quieted. She noticed me almost immediately. You keep appearing in unexpected places, she said with a small smile. Occupational hazard, I replied. She laughed softly. The sound surprised me. Not because it was unusual. Because I realized I wanted to hear it again. Rowan brushed a loose strand of hair behind her ear. Did you need something? There were 100 questions I wanted to ask. About the song. About Edith. About the pendant. About the notebook. Instead, I found myself asking something completely different. How long have you worked at the estate? She looked puzzled but answered anyway. Almost 8 months. 8 months. Yet somehow the answers to a 27-year-old mystery seemed to begin with her. Before I could say another word, the library door opened behind her. Edith Hale stepped outside carrying a stack of returned books. The moment she saw me, she froze. The books slipped slightly in her arms. Her eyes widened with unmistakable recognition. Then she whispered 6 words I was never supposed to hear. You have her eyes, Everett. For a moment the entire world seemed to stop. The traffic outside the library faded. The distant cries of seagulls vanished. Even Rowan's presence disappeared from my awareness. There was only Edith Hale standing on the library steps staring at me with tears gathering in her eyes. You have her eyes, Everett. The words landed harder than they should have. Because nobody talked about my mother anymore. Not in my family. Not in my business. Not in my life. Over the years her name had slowly become something people avoided, as if speaking it might disturb old ghosts. Yet Edith spoke about her as though she had seen her yesterday. Rowan looked between us, completely confused. Grandma! Edith blinked and seemed to realize what she had just said. She lowered her gaze immediately. I am sorry, she said quietly. You simply surprised me. But I knew that was not true. I had spent my entire adult life learning how to read people. Fear, deception, regret, grief. Edith was carrying all four. I stepped closer. You knew my mother. It was not a question. Edith's fingers tightened around the books she carried. For several seconds she said nothing. Rowan looked increasingly uncomfortable. Finally Edith nodded once. A long time ago. My chest tightened. How long? Almost 30 years. Rowan stared at her grandmother. You never told me that. Edith managed a weak smile. There are many things I never told you. The answer only deepened the mystery. A cold breeze drifted through the street. Pages rustled inside the books in Edith's arms. She looked suddenly older than she had the day before. More tired. More fragile. Would you join me for tea? She asked softly. The invitation surprised all three of us. Especially Rowan. Grandma? Rowan asked. Edith ignored her. Her eyes remained fixed on mine. There are things you deserve to know. Those words followed me an hour later as I parked outside a modest white house near the edge of town. The property overlooked the ocean. Not a mansion. Not an estate. Just a simple home with flower boxes beneath the windows and a weathered wooden porch facing the water. Rowan opened the front door before I could knock. I still do not understand what is happening, she admitted. That makes two of us. The smell of cinnamon and tea filled the house. Family photographs covered the walls. School pictures. Birthdays. Graduations. A lifetime of ordinary moments. Looking at them felt strangely painful. My own house contained paintings worth millions of dollars. Yet somehow it felt emptier than this small home. Edith sat at the kitchen table waiting. The silver pendant rested against her sweater. Between us sat a worn wooden box. She touched the lid gently. Your mother gave me this in 1998. My pulse quickened. What is inside? Edith looked toward the ocean beyond the window. Her expression filled with memories. Then she whispered the words that changed everything once again. A promise she made for Rowan before Rowan was even born. The kitchen suddenly felt smaller. The ticking clock on the wall sounded louder. Even the ocean outside seemed to hold its breath. Rowan looked as stunned as I felt. Before I was born? She asked. Edith nodded slowly. Her fingers rested on the wooden box, as though it contained something fragile enough to break with a single touch. Your mother and I became friends during one of the hardest years of my life, she said quietly. I was young, alone, scared. I had very little money and even less hope. Then she appeared. I leaned forward without realizing it. Every word mattered now. Every memory. Every detail. Edith opened the box carefully. Inside were dozens of old letters tied together with a faded blue ribbon. Some were yellowed with age. Others looked barely touched. The scent of old paper drifted into the room. Rowan stared at them. You kept all of these? Edith smiled sadly. Some people enter your life for a season. Others change your life forever. She lifted one envelope and handed it to me. My hands trembled slightly as I unfolded the letter. The handwriting was unmistakable. My mother's. The date at the top made my chest tighten. It had been written less than 6 months before her death. I began reading silently. The words were simple, warm, full of kindness. She wrote about the ocean, about music, about believing that people could find each other even after years apart. Then I reached the final paragraph. If anything ever happens to me, promise me you will keep singing the song. One day it will help someone find their way home. I lowered the letter slowly. The room was completely silent. Rowan looked between Edith and me. The song, she whispered. Edith nodded. Your mother taught it to me. My pulse quickened. Why? Edith looked toward the window where waves rolled across the distant shoreline. Because she believed songs carried memories farther than words ever could. Another letter emerged from the box. Then another. Page after page revealed pieces of a life I had never known. A life my mother had apparently shared with Edith but never with anyone else in our family. The realization hurt more than I expected. How much of her had remained hidden? How much had been taken from me before I ever had the chance to understand her? Then Edith reached the bottom of the box and froze. Her expression changed instantly. The warmth disappeared. Concern replaced it. No, she whispered. Rowan frowned. What is it? Edith searched through the contents again. Faster this time. More urgently. It was here. My stomach tightened. What was here? Edith looked directly at me. A second letter. The room went silent again. What second letter? I asked. Edith swallowed hard. The one she told me never to lose. Rowan exchanged a nervous glance with me. What was in it? Edith's eyes filled with emotion. The truth. Every muscle in my body went rigid. The truth about what? Edith opened her mouth to answer. Before she could speak, my phone buzzed on the table. The screen lit up with a message from Grant Mercer. Only 6 words appeared. Do not trust what Edith says. The message changed the temperature of the room. One moment I was listening to Edith's search for a missing truth. The next, 6 words from Grant Mercer sat glowing on my phone screen like a warning. Do not trust what Edith says. Rowan noticed my expression immediately. What happened? She asked. I turned the phone over before she could see the message. Instinct. Habit. Years of protecting information. Yet something about hiding it felt wrong. Edith watched me carefully. Not with fear. Not with guilt. With disappointment. As if she already knew who had sent the message. Grant Mercer, she asked quietly. My eyes narrowed. How did you know? A sad smile crossed her face. Because every time the past gets too close, his name appears. The answer hit harder than I expected. Rowan looked between us again. Can somebody please explain what is going on? Nobody answered immediately. Outside, the afternoon sun reflected off the ocean beyond the kitchen window. Everything looked peaceful. Ordinary. Yet beneath that calm surface, something enormous was shifting. I looked back at Edith. You were about to tell me what the missing letter contained. Her hands folded together on the table. I was. Then tell me. She took a slow breath. Your mother believed someone inside your family was hiding something from her. The words settled heavily between us. What kind of something? I asked. Edith hesitated. She never wrote it directly. She was afraid her letters would be found. But near the end, she became convinced that certain events surrounding your family did not make sense. Rowan sat down quietly across from us. The confusion on her face had slowly transformed into concern. You mean before she died? Edith nodded. Especially before she died. My chest tightened. For years I had accepted every explanation I was given. Every official story. Every carefully prepared answer. Suddenly those answers felt less certain. Edith opened another envelope from the wooden box. Inside was a single folded page. Not written by my mother. Written by Edith herself decades ago. I kept notes after each letter arrived, she explained. Your mother asked me to. She adjusted her glasses and read aloud. She says the song matters. She says if anything happens, the song will help identify the people she trusted. A chill moved through me. The song again. Everything kept returning to the song. Why? Rowan asked softly. Edith looked at her granddaughter. Because only a few people knew every verse. Silence filled the kitchen. Then another realization struck me. Every verse. Edith nodded slowly. The version you heard Rowan singing is incomplete. My pulse quickened. What do you mean? Rowan frowned. Grandma, that is the only version I know. Exactly, Edith replied. She stood and walked toward an old cabinet near the refrigerator. After a moment she returned carrying a weathered music notebook. The same green cloth cover from the estate photographs. My heart began to race. Edith opened it carefully. Most pages contained familiar lyrics. Then she stopped near the back. Several pages had been removed, torn cleanly from the binding. The final verse was here, she whispered. The verse your mother said nobody should hear until the right time. I stared at the missing pages. Rowan stared too. Then Edith spoke the words that made my stomach drop. The pages disappeared 3 days ago. 3 days. The words echoed through my mind long after Edith said them. 3 days ago, the missing pages had still been inside the notebook. 3 days ago, the final verse had existed. 3 days ago, someone had decided it could not remain there. I stared at the torn edges where the pages once belonged. The paper fibers were still pale compared to the older yellowed sheets around them. Edith was telling the truth. The removal had been recent. Rowan looked equally disturbed. Who would take them? She asked. Edith slowly closed the notebook. Someone who knew what they contained. The answer settled heavily over the room. Outside, clouds drifted across the afternoon sky. The sunlight faded slightly, casting long shadows across the kitchen floor. Everything suddenly felt connected. The song, the pendant, the notebook, the missing letter, the warnings from Grant Mercer. Pieces of a puzzle that seemed to grow larger every time I thought I was getting closer to the center. My phone buzzed again. Another message from Grant. This time it contained only an address. No explanation. No context. Just an address located less than 2 miles away. I showed the screen to Edith. The color drained from her face immediately. How does he know about that place? She whispered. My pulse quickened. What place? Edith looked toward the window, toward the ocean, toward something only she could see. Your mother used to go there when she needed to think. Rowan frowned. Grandma, what place? Edith hesitated. Then she stood and reached for her coat. I will show you. 40 minutes later, the three of us followed a narrow coastal road that wound between rocky cliffs and windswept grass. The Atlantic stretched endlessly beside us, gray water beneath a gray sky. Eventually the road ended near an abandoned lighthouse overlooking the sea. Time had weathered the structure. Paint peeled from the walls. Windows stood empty. Yet the moment I stepped out of the car, something felt familiar. Not because I remember being there. Because my mother had described it in one of her letters. The lighthouse where the ocean sings back. I remembered reading that phrase only days earlier. Edith led us inside. Wooden stairs spiraled upward through the center of the tower. Dust covered most surfaces. Yet one thing stood out immediately. Someone had been here recently. Fresh footprints crossed the floor. Rowan noticed them too. We are not alone in this, she whispered. We climbed to the top. Wind rattled the old structure. The ocean stretched for miles in every direction. Then Edith stopped beside a loose wooden panel hidden behind an old storage cabinet. Her hands trembled as she pulled it aside. Behind it sat a small metal box. My heart pounded. Edith opened it carefully. Inside were photographs, letters, sheet music, decades of preserved memories. But resting on top was something else. A single page torn from the missing section of the notebook. Rowan gasped softly. I reached for the page. The paper contained handwritten lyrics in my mother's unmistakable script. Yet it was not the lyrics that froze me. It was the line written beneath them. A line clearly intended for only one person to read. Everett, if you are reading this, the person you trust most has been lying to you for years. The sentence refused to leave my mind. Even after I read it 3 times, the words felt impossible. The person you trust most has been lying to you for years. Wind pushed against the lighthouse windows. The ocean crashed softly against the rocks below. Somewhere behind me, Rowan and Edith remained silent, giving me space to absorb what I had just found. I stared at my mother's handwriting. Every letter was unmistakably hers. Every curve of the pen carried the same familiarity I remembered from childhood birthday cards and notes left beside my breakfast plate. This was not a forgery. This was not a misunderstanding. She had written it herself. The question was who she meant. Slowly, I searched through the contents of the metal box. More photographs appeared. More letters. Receipts. Old maps. Small pieces of a life hidden away for decades. Then I found something unexpected. A folded newspaper clipping. The article was nearly 30 years old. The headline mentioned a charitable foundation established by my father. At first glance it seemed ordinary. Then I noticed a handwritten circle around one name in the article. Owen Callahan. My uncle. Beneath the clipping my mother had written 4 words. Watch who benefits most. My stomach tightened. Owen had always been close to my father. After my mother's death, he became even more involved in the family business. He helped raise me, guided me, protected me, or at least that was what I had always believed. Rowan stepped closer. Did you find something? She asked gently. I handed her the clipping. Her eyes moved across the page. You think your mother was talking about him? I do not know what to think anymore. The admission surprised me. For most of my life, certainty had been my greatest strength. Now uncertainty followed me everywhere. Edith slowly sat beside an old wooden table near the lighthouse window. She looked exhausted. Years of carrying secrets seemed to weigh heavily on her shoulders. Your mother trusted very few people near the end, she said quietly. But she trusted me enough to hide these things here. I looked toward her. Why did she never tell me? Pain flickered across Edith's face. Because you were a child, Everett. And because she hoped she would have time. Those words hit harder than anything else. She hoped she would have time. The ocean breeze drifted through a crack in the window. Rowan wrapped her arms around herself against the chill. Without thinking, I removed my jacket and handed it to her. She looked surprised. You do not have to do that. Take it. For a brief moment our eyes met. Something unspoken passed between us. Not romance. Not yet. Something quieter. Trust beginning to form in the middle of confusion. Then Edith reached deeper into the metal box. Her hand emerged holding a sealed envelope. Unlike the others, this one carried my name on the front. Everett. No last name. Just Everett. My pulse immediately accelerated. The envelope had never been opened. The seal remained intact despite the passing years. Edith stared at it as though seeing it for the first time. I have never seen that before, she whispered. My hands trembled slightly as I accepted it. On the back flap, written in my mother's handwriting, was a final instruction. Open only after you find the missing verse. The envelope felt heavier than paper should feel. I stared at my name written in my mother's handwriting while the sound of the ocean echoed through the lighthouse. For years I had wanted one more conversation with her. One more chance to ask the questions that never stopped following me. Now a piece of her sat in my hands waiting. Yet I could not open it. Not yet. Open only after you find the missing verse. The instruction was clear. My mother had never been careless with words. If she wanted the envelope opened later, there was a reason. Rowan seemed to understand that immediately. You are not going to open it, are you? She asked softly. I shook my head. Not until I know why she wanted me to wait. A small smile appeared on her face. That sounds like the right answer. Something about hearing her say that settled the storm in my chest. The last several days had felt like walking through fog. Every answer created 3 more questions. Yet Rowan remained calm in a way I could not explain. She did not chase conclusions. She listened. She observed. She trusted her instincts. I was beginning to trust them too. As the sun started sinking toward the horizon, Edith continued sorting through the contents of the metal box. Most of the documents were personal. Letters. Notes. Small reminders of friendships and promises. Then she paused suddenly. Her hand froze above a folded map. This should not be here, she whispered. I stepped closer. The map showed the coastline surrounding the town. Several locations were marked in red ink. The lighthouse. Edith's house. The community library. The Callahan estate. My pulse quickened immediately. Someone had drawn a line connecting all 4 places. Rowan leaned forward. What does it mean? Edith slowly unfolded a smaller note attached to the map. The paper was newer than everything else in the box. Much newer. Not decades old. Recent. Very recent. The handwriting was unfamiliar. We are running out of time. Silence filled the room. Every instinct I possessed suddenly came alive. Somebody else knew about the box. Somebody else knew about the hidden history connecting our lives. More importantly, somebody had accessed this hiding place after my mother's death. The realization changed everything. Until now I had been searching through the past. Suddenly the mystery belonged to the present. I looked toward the lighthouse door. The fading sunlight cast long shadows across the floorboards. For the first time I wondered how many people knew we were here. My phone buzzed again. This time it was not Grant Mercer. The message came from an unknown number. I opened it carefully. Attached was a photograph. My breath caught instantly. It showed the missing notebook pages spread across a wooden table. Every missing verse. Every missing lyric. The pages we had been searching for. Beneath the image was a single sentence. If you want the rest of the truth, come alone. Rowan immediately noticed my expression. What is it? She asked. I handed her the phone. Her eyes widened. Edith looked over her shoulder and went completely pale. Then she whispered something I never expected to hear. That table belongs to Owen Callahan. The drive back from the lighthouse felt longer than it should have. Nobody spoke much. The photograph of the missing pages remained open on my phone screen like a challenge I could not ignore. Owen Callahan. My uncle. The man who taught me how to ride a bicycle. The man who attended every school event after my mother died. The man I trusted without question for most of my life. I kept replaying my mother's words in my head. The person you trust most has been lying to you for years. Until now, I had refused to connect the warning to anyone specific. That became harder with every passing mile. By the time we reached town, the sky had turned dark blue. Streetlights reflected across the harbor water. Rowan sat quietly in the passenger seat while Edith rested in the back. The silence between us was not uncomfortable. It felt heavy with understanding. We all knew the same thing. Whatever happened next would change everything. When we arrived at Edith's house, she surprised me. Instead of getting out immediately, she reached forward and placed a small brass key in my hand. The metal was worn smooth from age. "Your mother gave me this," she said softly. "She told me to give it to you only when the truth became impossible to ignore." I stared at the key. "What does it open?" Edith looked toward the ocean beyond the windshield. A place nobody remembers anymore. An hour later, I stood alone inside the west wing of the Callahan estate. Most of the mansion slept. Hallways stretched through shadows and silence. The brass key rested heavily in my pocket. I could have gone to Owen immediately. I could have demanded answers. Instead, something told me to follow my mother's path first. The key led me somewhere I had not visited since childhood. A forgotten storage room hidden behind the old music room. Dust covered everything. Furniture sat beneath white sheets. Cardboard boxes lined the walls. For years I assumed the room held nothing important. Then I noticed a small locked cabinet built directly into the wall. My pulse quickened. The brass key fit perfectly. The lock clicked open. Inside sat a single wooden case. No documents. No photographs. Just a case. I lifted the lid slowly. My breath caught. Resting inside was a recording device and several cassette tapes carefully labeled in my mother's handwriting. One tape stood apart from the others. A red ribbon marked its edge. Across the front she had written a date. The week before her death. My hands trembled as I inserted the tape into the player. Static filled the room. Then her voice emerged. Soft. Warm. Familiar. 27 years disappeared in an instant. "If you are hearing this, Everett," she said gently, "then the song finally led you where it was supposed to." Tears burned unexpectedly behind my eyes. I had not heard her voice since I was 11 years old. The recording continued. "There is something you must understand about Owen. He did not betray me. He was trying to protect someone." I froze. Every assumption shattered instantly. Then her voice spoke one final sentence before the tape abruptly ended. "The person you should be looking for is Grant Mercer." For a long time, I sat alone in the storage room listening to silence. The tape had ended. My mother's voice was gone again. Yet the final words remained. "The person you should be looking for is Grant Mercer." Outside, waves rolled against the distant shoreline beneath the darkness. Inside, everything I believed had been turned upside down. Owen was not the answer. He was another piece of the story. Another person carrying a burden he never fully explained. The next morning arrived with cold ocean air and pale sunlight spilling across the estate. For the first time in years, I ignored every meeting on my schedule. Numbers no longer mattered. Contracts no longer mattered. There was only one thing left to understand. By noon, Grant Mercer was sitting across from me in my office. The same office where he had spent years advising my family. The same office where he had looked me in the eyes and warned me not to trust Edith. For several seconds, neither of us spoke. Then I placed the cassette recorder on the desk between us. His face immediately lost color. That was all the confirmation I needed. "You knew," I said quietly. Grant closed his eyes. Not in guilt. In exhaustion. The kind carried by someone who had spent decades protecting a secret. "I knew part of it," he admitted. The room felt strangely calm. No anger. No shouting. Just truth finally arriving after years of delay. Grant explained everything slowly. My mother had discovered financial records connected to powerful people outside the family. Information she believed could destroy lives if it fell into the wrong hands. She never intended to expose anyone. She only wanted the evidence protected. The song became a code between trusted friends. The letters became safeguards. The hidden places became insurance. When she died unexpectedly, pieces of the truth scattered across different people and different locations. Grant spent years trying to keep those pieces hidden because he believed he was honoring her wishes. But over time, protection became secrecy. Secrecy became fear. Fear became silence. By the end, even he no longer knew where the line was. When he finished speaking, I felt something unexpected. Relief. Not because every question had been answered. Because the mystery no longer controlled me. My mother had not left a treasure hunt. She had left a lesson. Trust matters. Promises matter. People matter. The following weekend, the Harbor Festival returned for its closing celebration. Music drifted across the waterfront. Families filled the streets. Children chased one another beneath strings of lights. Rowan stood on a small stage near the water helping local performers organize the evening program. The ocean breeze moved through her hair as she laughed with the volunteers around her. For a moment I simply watched. Not because she held answers. Because she had become part of my future. When she finally noticed me standing near the crowd, her smile appeared instantly. The same smile that somehow made the world feel less complicated. Later that evening, a local musician asked Rowan to sing. She hesitated at first. Then she stepped toward the microphone. The harbor grew quiet. The first notes floated across the water. The song. The same melody that had changed everything. The same melody that led me through grief, memory, and truth. But something was different now. For 27 years that song belonged to loss. To questions. To the past. Standing there beneath the festival lights, listening to Rowan sing while the ocean shimmered behind her, I finally understood what my mother had been trying to tell me. Some songs are not meant to bring us back to what we lost. They are meant to lead us toward what we still have. And for the first time since I was 11 years old, I stopped looking behind me and started listening to what came next.